I wanted to welcome all of you to Baltimore to the 24th Family Seminar, and thank you all for coming. And I know it's difficult to travel these days, and it's a big effort to get here, but we appreciate it, and hopefully it will be an interesting day. Here's our agenda, and I want to thank Crystal Tichnell, who really organized the seminar. We have a great lineup of speakers, including a couple heavy hitters. Sam Sears is back he's one of the most loyal speakers we've had coming back so Sam, thank you for being here, and Mario Delmar, our two outside speakers. Now, after this morning's session, there's one break. The schedule's in your book. Then we'll have lunch, and then this afternoon there's a question and answer period from 2 to 3, and I know some of you are participating in research, and we're grateful for that. I want to particularly acknowledge our speakers today, each of whom put a lot of effort in putting together their talk and thinking about this in a thoughtful way, and I think you're all going to be in for a real treat. I also want to acknowledge our sponsors of this program, and they're listed here: Gold, Tenaya; Silver, Lexio Therapeutics; Rocket Pharmaceuticals, Boston Scientific; and Bronze, Arvada, Rejuvenate Bio, and iRhythm. And that support is very much appreciated. So the title that Crystal gave me is the Johns Hopkins ARVC program, Then and Now. She always picks the talk I love, so it's sort of fun to go down memory lane and sort of look at how it all started and where we are today. So I'm going to tell you this story about how I got interested in ARVC, and it all started in 1997 when I met Carrie Campanella, who was a 35-year-old woman who had passed out. She was a big horse rider. Her physical examination was unremarkable, but her family history was notable for the fact that her dad died suddenly at the age of 36. Her father was Joe Campanella, who was a professional football player with the Baltimore Colts, and is shown here. And at that point, at the time he passed away, his wife was pregnant with a son, John, who I'll tell you about in a second. So this is Carrie's EKG. This is a very typical EKG for ARVC with T-wave inversions in the precordial leads. Her MRI showed that her right ventricle was dilated. Her EP study was positive. We said, yes, you have ARVD, and we recommended a defibrillator. We also acknowledged that in those days, we didn't know much about risk stratification for ARVD. Who needs a defibrillator, who doesn't need a defibrillator, but she appeared to have pretty significant disease, and that's what we recommended. She had a busy summer schedule, decided to wait till the end of the summer to have it implanted, and sadly, she had a cardiac arrest and died 4 months later. In an autopsy, the diagnosis was confirmed. So a short while later, I ended up seeing her younger brother, John, who was 30, newly married, and he was having some palpitations and was concerned that he too may have ARVC. So here's his EKG. It also shows some abnormalities with some T-wave inversions. His Holter was pretty quiet with 110 PVCs. His MRI showed some subtle changes, but nothing dramatic, and the EP study was negative. But at the end of the day, we elected to put a defibrillator in. Again, we didn't know a lot about risk stratification, but we know his mom, his father, and his sister had died suddenly, and it seemed like a prudent thing to do. And we called up Frank Marcus, who said, for ARVD, it's important not to exercise, so we told John to lay off the exercise. And now, 26 years later, he's done beautifully well, never had a shock, multiple defibrillators. He has 2 kids, and the mutation PKP2 was identified in John and in family members. So at that point, John traveled around. He went to Italy. He went to Frank Marcus to see Frank Marcus in Arizona to learn more about this condition. And he came back to Baltimore, and he said, we need to do something about it because there's a lot of unanswered questions. And in 1997, it wasn't known how to diagnose the disease. What's the natural history? What predicts progression? Should you restrict exercise? What about medications? How do you assess who's at high risk of sudden death and needs a defibrillator? Should all patients get a defibrillator? And it wasn't even known what the genetic defects were that caused this disease. It appeared to be familial, but the genetic variants were uncertain. Can a specific genetic abnormality predict a patient's clinical course? And how can we cure ARVD? All these questions were unknown at that point. And with John and Kathy's encouragement, we started this program, ARVD.com, and it was Kathy who came up with the ARVD.com website. I didn't even know what a website was or an online thing was at that point, but Kathy figured it out, and we started the program in 1999. And the goals were to work with the international ARVC community to create new knowledge concerning the cause, early diagnosis, and treatment of the disease. And then we wanted to provide education for physicians and patients. And we realized that most physicians don't care much about ARVD because they'll either see no ARVD patients in their life or only one, and that the people that really cared a lot were the patients. So that's why we started a family seminar to get the message to the most important people, the families affected by this condition. And we wanted to coordinate the diagnostic evaluation and care of patients with ARVD. Now, again, we want to acknowledge John and Kathy Campanella. It really was their idea that got this started. And then they were remarkable. They back in those days, football players didn't make huge buckets of money, so they couldn't make a huge gift to support the program. But they identified Jack Bogle, shown here, and he was the founder of the Vanguard Funds in Philadelphia. And Mr. Bogle was nice enough to give us a large grant to start the program, not as an endowment, but as jet fuel to get people hired, get the program going. Really a remarkable act of generosity. And the Wilmerding family also stepped up with some funding in the early days. And with that, we started the program. So we're going to start this program, so we need some people to get to work. And I made two very good decisions in those days. The first hire was a genetic counselor. And that's because someone at church was a genetic counselor, and they said, that's who you need to hire. I didn't even know what a genetic counselor was. And this person at church says, they're very smart, it's a genetic condition, that's who you need to hire. So we hired Julie Rutberg, who was our first full-time employee of the program. And then we needed a research fellow to do a lot of research and work hard and work on the data and publish papers. And there was this young fellow, Harry Tandry, looking for some research experience. And we hired him, took a chance on him, hired him, and he spent 2 years as an ARVC research fellow. And then, as you all know, ultimately became a colleague and the co-director of the program. And now he's flown off to Vanderbilt, but he was an important early acquisition in this program. And then we needed some faculty members to get interested in ARVC. Dan Judd was interested in genetics and heart failure. David Blumke was the world's expert on MRI, and Stu Russell was a head of the heart failure program, and these were the three key Hopkins faculty members who expressed an interest and sort of joined the team. And then a crucial part of the program was the support of world leaders, both Frank Marcus and Guy Fontaine. Now, sadly, Frank Marcus passed away this past December. He was 94. And I think many of you know him. He attended this meeting, spoke at this meeting probably 5 or 10 times. He was the one that really put ARVC on the map. We'll talk about him in a second. And then Guy Fontaine, who Frank had done a sabbatical with in Paris, who was an even earlier pioneer in ARVC, was another great supporter of this program. This is the paper that Frank wrote in 1982 with the first series of ARVC patients. This was really the first time ARVC was sort of identified as a specific condition, and it was Frank working with Guy Fontaine that made this paper possible. So I just want to acknowledge this contribution and Frank's many contributions to the field. And then the next sort of crucial thing with the crucial hires were Crystal and Cindy in 2002, so 21 years ago. Crystal and Cindy joined the team, so I think without them, this program would be nowhere. So thank you, Crystal and Cindy, for 21 years, and they have another 21 to go. And then Brittany was brought in 2010, and Brittany has that Midwest get-it-done approach, and I think we all know and love Brittany. So thank you, Brittany. And then, from the beginning, we realized this was a rare disease and we needed to collaborate with folks from all over the world that work in ARVC. So this is just sort of a list of the collaborators we've developed over time, and it's really been a worldwide effort. Now, in the early days, our research focused on the clinical features of ARVD, describing the disease, what's the EKG look like, what does the MRI look like, who needs a defibrillator, who has arrhythmias, and what's the natural history of the disease. And in your packet, you have a list of all the papers that have been published, over 200 papers. But if you look at some of those early papers, it was the MRI features of ARVD, the EKG features of ARVD, papers on the role of the defibrillator, more papers on misdiagnosis. Patients get told they have ARVD and don't have it. I think, and then we pull out their defibrillator, looking again at the EKG features of the disease. And we are very proud in 2005 to write a paper on the U.S. experience with ARVD. In the early days, people thought it was a European disease or a French disease, and it didn't occur in the U.S. And we put together a paper of 100 patients. We thought that was a massive number. We're really proud of it. Now, of course, we put together papers with more than 1,000 patients, so times changed. So then over time, our research focus evolved to the genetic basis of ARVC. What are the genetic underpinnings of the disease? What about exercise, risk factors for sudden death? And then we focus more on the link between ARVC and heart failure. So if you look at some of the papers from those days, clinical features of ARVC associated with mutations in plakophilin-2. And then another paper describing DSG. It was actually Dan Judge in our group that identified the DSG mutation. That was the first time that was ever discovered, another major contribution. More papers on penetrance of plakophilin-2 mutations, and papers on the outcome and efficacy of catheter ablation of ET. And so, and then other papers on predictors of defibrillator therapy. And then one of the most important papers we wrote was in 2013. Cindy put together a paper looking at exercise in ARVC. And that paper has been enormously impactful and really taught us all how important exercise is in causing ARVC and restricting exercise is in treating ARVC. And again, that paper was 10 years ago now. So what's our research focus today? Well, we're still working on better risk stratification tools. We now have tools on your iPhone. You can pull up an app and put in your variables and predict your risk of an arrhythmia at 1 and 5 years. We're focused on gene-specific diagnosis and management. This is one of the biggest changes in the field. In the old days, we sort of lumped ARVC all together, whether you have desmoplakin, plakophilin-2, TMEM43, phospholamban, and we just called it all ARVC. But we're now realizing that each of these different genetic variants behaves differently, has different risks for sudden death, different links to exercise, different degrees of involvement of the left ventricle. So we're actually now beginning to lead an international effort where we'll change the diagnostic criteria. So instead of saying I have ARVC, is I have desmoplakin disease, or I have plakophilin-2 disease, or phospholamban disease, or whatever it is. And we're getting much more granular as we move towards personalized management of patients based on their genetic variants. So that's a big focus. And then the other huge focus, which is one of the most exciting things, is gene therapy, which is imminent. And when we set out to this program all these years ago, the goal was to cure ARVC. Well, cure may be around the corner with the gene therapy, and we're most excited that there's a number of gene therapy companies now that are doing a huge amount of research in this space, and that hope is on the way. And Andreas Barth will tell you more about that later this morning. So nothing gets done without people. So this is a list of our ARVC team. These are our full-time ARVC team members. All they do 24/7 is work and think about ARVC. And we're grateful to each and every one of them. Some have been here for 21 years, some for a year, but it takes a team, and we're really most grateful to them for their many contributions. We have the faculty members. Now, the faculty members do other things. They're here on the cardiology faculty or the radiology faculty, but each of these individuals has gotten involved with the research in ARVC, is making contributions to the field, and again, without them, this program wouldn't be possible. And then finally, we have our research fellows, the folks that are doing the work with the data. All of you contribute to our database, contribute blood and ICD information and so on and so forth. And these are the people that weave this data into papers. And again, if you look at your handout, over 200 papers have been published. But it's these young, energetic, super bright people that really make an enormous difference. And you're going to hear from two of them today. Alessio Gasparetti and Rick Carrick are two of our star research fellows who will present some of their really interesting data today. In terms of accomplishments, in our little summary, we have a sort of a summary of some of the many things that have occurred. But over time, we've evaluated more than 3,000 patients. This is our 24th family seminar. Now, we were put in the COVID mode for a while where they had to be virtual. And there was one year, I think it was actually couldn't happen. It was canceled last minute. We've delivered lectures all over the world in ARVC, and we published 228 scientific manuscripts that really have defined this field, and we're just getting going. So let me just conclude that the Hopkins ARVC program, it's continuing to focus on its goals set forth when we established this program in 1999. We've made great progress. It's unbelievable what's been accomplished, but we aren't going to rest on our laurels. A lot more work lies ahead. We're really excited to be entering the era of gene-specific diagnosis, management, and treatment, and also gene therapy. Unbelievably exciting. And again, I want to thank all of you for your support, and I'll stop there.